Okay, I got it going, and it is recording. Okay. Let's, we'll take it down this time.
Are you ready? Okay, take her away.
All right, thank you. Call your first witness, please.
Yes, Judge. State calls K.D. Davis, please.
If you will just come down here to the front. Please raise your right hand. Officer Davis, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Be seated, sir.
Good afternoon, officer. Tell the jury your name, please.
Officer Davis with the Cobb County Police Department.
And how long have you worked with the Cobb County Police Department now?
I've been with Cobb County approximately 2 years.
And did you have any prior law enforcement experience before coming here to Cobb?
Yes, sir. I worked prior for Middle Georgia State University for 2 years.
Okay. So where is that in the state of Georgia? What city or county?
It's in a little town called Cochran, which is probably 30 minutes from Macon, Georgia.
All right. And how long did you work down there in Cochran?
2 years.
So have you successfully completed your post-mandated training for Georgia police officers?
Yes, sir. I actually went through the academy twice. Once for my last agency, and Cobb County has its own agency. I did it twice.
You graduated successfully from both, correct?
Yes, sir.
Since then and up to the present, you're a certified and approved law enforcement officer of the state of Georgia.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you to go back to May 16th, 2014. That particular date, May 16th, what day of the week was that when you responded to this particular call that we're here on?
I believe it was Friday morning.
Okay. Have you reviewed anything to help you remember when this 911 call came out?
Yes, sir. I reviewed my incident report and also the audio from my car.
So what time did the 911 call come out such that you got dispatched?
We got dispatched around 1:20 a.m., I believe.
And then approximately what time did you get over to the location?
I probably arrived around between 1:25 and 1:30.
What was the address of where you responded to, please?
2451 Reese Farms Trail.
Is it 2451 or 2541?
In my report, I have 2451. It's 2541.
I will show you this diagram. You've already seen it.
Yes, sir.
It's an aerial. You've already seen this State's Exhibit 1 in my office, right?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with this area, this neighborhood, or these neighborhoods from your police work?
Yes, sir.
Does this exhibit, State's Exhibit 1, does it show accurately an aerial view of the land and the houses and the streets over there at Reese Farms Trail and Old Villa Rica Road?
Yes, sir.
Judge, we would tender State's Exhibit 1.
No objection.
Be admitted.
All right. So when you got dispatched out, it was to, it's hard to see from right here, but to 2541 Reese Farms Trail, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's a residence?
Yes, sir.
And is that particular residence, is that in Cobb County, Georgia?
Yes, sir.
In fact, this entire aerial view that we have that includes, Old Villa Way and Hemingway Drive and all these other streets, is everything that we're looking at in this aerial view all within Cobb County, Georgia?
Yes, sir.
So when you got out there, did you meet with a Devon Adams when you went out to this house?
Yes, sir.
And give the jury an idea, you know, when you talked with Devon Adams, how did he appear? What was his demeanor?
Devon's demeanor was like he was very angry about what had just occurred. He was angry and kind of nervous and pretty much like, why did this occur?
Did you then also meet the defendant in this case, Joshua Gerard?
Yes, sir.
And do you see him in court here today?
Yes, sir. Right over there.
Just for the record, if you will tell us, point to him and tell us what clothes he's wearing today, just for the record.
Yes, sir. He's the guy in the middle with the black colored suit and the blue shirt and the striped tie.
I ask that the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant, Joshua Gerard. Tell us when you went out there on this police call, what was his demeanor, Mr. Gerard's demeanor that night?
His demeanor was like he was not nervous or did not appear to be afraid or angry. His demeanor appeared normal, like nothing had happened.
Now, did you talk with both of these guys
Yes, sir.
about what happened?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you about your conversation with Mr. Gerard. Basically, did you ask him, you know, what happened? And what did he tell you out there on the scene as to what happened?
He stated that him and Devon was sitting on the porch, and Devon walked in the house to grab a cigarette lighter for Mr. Joshua. And he stated that as they were sitting on the porch, a suspicious person walked up, and they didn't know who he was. He went to a different residence across from the 2541 residence. And that's when Devon went inside the house to grab the cigarette lighter for Joshua. And when Devon came back outside the residence, the suspicious person came from around the side of the house and began to rob them with the gun. Said, "Give it up, give it up." Devon stated that Joshua stated that he pushed him to the ground. Of course, he took everything out of his pockets, and he told Mr. Devon to take his shorts off. I think Joshua stated $108 cash got took from him, a debit card, car keys, and I think that's it.
What about phones? Did he say any phones got taken?
Yes, sir. One of them had an iPhone 5 and the other one had an iPhone 4. I believe they both were white.
So did you ask any more questions of Mr. Gerard out there about like how he arrived to be at this location that night?
Yes, sir. As I started to investigate, I asked, how did he get here or whatever, and what is the relationship between him and Devon? He stated they was friends about 2 months. They met in a mall over some shoes that Devon had on. He said, "Hey, I like those shoes," or whatever. "Those are the shoes I'm thinking about buying." So that's how they became friends. As to how he got there, he stated that his friend, I believe he referred to her as Tish, had picked him up in front of his residence off of Delk Road and drove him to Hemington Way, which he walked from that address to 2541. And then continuing the investigation, he stated and changed his story once again and stated that he got dropped off by his friend Tish. So between the stories he told me, he couldn't give an accurate story to me.
So the first story is that he got a ride from Tish to, and I got Hemingway. Is that the road he said? You said Hemington.
Hemingway.
So the first one is he said this Tish gave him a ride from where to Hemingway?
From what I call, he said his residence off of Delk Road.
Okay. And then after he told you that story, what other, you said there was another one?
He stated he was going to Hemingway for a get-together or to hang out with his friends. And he stated from that point, he walked to Mr. Devon's house, the 2541 Reese Farms Trail. So he changed that story later down the road and stated that he got dropped off by Tish.
So during this time that you're talking with Mr. Gerard, did he ever say, when he was talking about the armed robber, that he actually knew the dude that did the armed robbery?
No, he never stated.
And did he ever tell you during the time that you were talking with him, that he actually drove a car to this neighborhood? Did he ever mention that?
No, sir, I did not know he drove a car until I dropped him off at the car after he got done talking to the detective.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You were aware that the two phones that had been taken were both iPhones, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you the only police officer out there?
It was me and my sergeant mostly doing all the talking and investigation between Mr. Joshua and Mr. Devon.
But it wasn't just you, am I right?
Yes, it wasn't just me.
Did you or y'all, the police, ask both either Devon Adams and or Joshua Gerard to see if they could, track their phone in some way?
Yes, sir, because I have an iPhone myself. I know there is an app called iCloud, which you can also log on to find your phone. So I had Mr. Joshua log into his account.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's go chronologically. Who did you ask first? Do you remember?
I think I asked Devon first. He logged in and he could not track the iPhone because his phone had been turned off at that point. So at that time, I asked Mr. Joshua to log into his iCloud account, which he did successfully the first time. So we were able to track his iPhone off of Villa Rica and Villa Rica Way.
So it actually gave you a location of basically, let me get out of the way. Old Villa Way, it's hard for you to see there, ain't it?
Yes, sir.
And I will put it up here. This is the intersection of Old Villa Way and Old Villa Rica, right?
Yes, sir.
And then what happened while that was going on?
I informed my sergeant where I located the phone possibly in the area. So my sergeant, Sergeant Heckscher, had dispatched a couple of officers to search the area.
Okay. And did you guys, were you as a police officer, were you interested to see if this phone was going to move, or stay stationary?
Yes, sir. Somehow the iPad got logged off, so I had Mr. Joshua to try to log in again. And this time he was unsuccessful. So I asked him, why can't he log in? And he said, probably I forgot my password. I asked him to keep on trying again. He said he forgot his password again.
So how many times did he at least ask or try to log back into this account that he had just logged into successfully the first time?
He attempted several times, at least more than 5 times.
At least more than 5 times?
Yes, sir.
Did he ever actually log back in?
No, after the first time he logged in, he couldn't log in again successfully.
And the stories that he was saying was that was more than one story, or what was he saying about why he couldn't do this no more?
He stated that something is wrong with it, and he stated that he forgot his password the second time. The first time he stated his password was not working properly.
Tell the jury about the patrol car that you had that night. Did it have a video recording system?
Yes, sir. The car I'm driving did have audio, and audio was also activated during the interview or investigation of both Mr. Joshua as well as Mr. Devon.
So have you, I will show you State's Exhibit 21. Are you familiar with this particular disc?
Yes, sir.
And did you put your initials on that today?
Yes, sir. KDD.
Did you bring this disc to court today at my request?
Yes.
Have you already reviewed it?
Yes.
So I can tell you this, we're not going to watch this whole thing, but if we were, how long is this whole thing?
Approximately around 2 hours.
So even though it shows video, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's on the patrol car mounted, am I right?
Yes, sir.
So it's not a body cam like that when you go in, it's on your person. It's mounted to the police car, right?
Yes, sir.
So basically, as far as the only thing that video took pictures of was what or took video of?
Whatever is in front of the patrol car, which was a road and a couple of houses and other patrol cars.
But there is some audio also, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
When you first parked, how close were you to this to this house where Devon lives right here?
We were approximately 4 or 5 houses down, usually for officer safety, since the call was an armed robbery. And the dispatch came out that there was possibly still a person involved inside the residence. So we do not park up close next to the house for officer safety reasons.
So when you parked 4 or 5 houses down from the house that you eventually went to, can you just tell us, is the audio perfect on this thing?
Yes, sir.
It is?
It's actually pretty good.
Pretty good. I mean, the further you are away when you, with the microphone, are in the house and your car is 4 houses back, is that affected at all as far as the audio?
It could, but in this case, the audio, you can hear each person talking kind of good and understand what they are saying.
As far as the audio that's on this, did it accurately record the sights and sounds from patrol car and the conversations that you were having on this State's Exhibit 21?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody, made any changes to this?
No, sir.
Or switched it around or take anything out?
No, sir.
We will tender State's Exhibit 21. Again, I'm only going to ask to play a very short portion of it.
No objection.
Admitted.
So you can look up there on the monitor. It actually has the time. We're about 2:58:30 in the morning. Is that correct? Is that basically where we're at right now?
Yes, sir.
And is that basically accurate as far as what time this was at this portion of the video?
Yes, sir.
So I will play probably no more than 5 minutes or so. But there was a time at about 2:58 or so in the morning where you were talking with Mr. Gerard that you noticed anything in his hands?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury what you saw in his hands. And
I noticed that Mr. Gerard had a car key in his hand with like maybe one other key on it. And I asked him, what kind of car do you own? And he went on talking about he owned a Chevrolet Impala. Well, he owned an Audi or whatever, but it's in the shop with an expired tag. So the dealer he bought the Audi from had gave him a Chevrolet Impala, which also had expired tags, which is the reason he wasn't driving it that night. The story he was trying to give me was very confusing, so I had to ask him several times to clarify the story.
so when you noticed that he had some keys in his hand is why you started asking about what kind of car he had, and he talked about an Audi and an Impala.
Yes, sir.
I will show you. Okay, so the keys that you saw in Mr. Gerard's hand, I'm going to show you a photo marked State's Exhibit 20. Do you see the keys in this particular photo?
I see keys, but those are not the keys he had.
That's the point I'm trying to make here. So these keys that are in State's Exhibit number 20, they are not the keys that you saw in his hands.
No, sir.
Your Honor, before that's shown to the jury, I would like to clarify something for the record. It's not been tendered. Mr. First did ask if I had an objection to publishing a portion of it. I don't subject to it being later made part of evidence. The whole photograph will later, I think, based on the state's assertions, be brought into evidence. So I won't object to a portion of it being shown at this point, even though it's not been tendered.
That's exactly the question I asked him, whether he would be okay with that. So I covered up every part of this photo except the part that shows these keys. What we're looking at here on State's Exhibit 20, this key ring has got a little hook. I guess you'd call it a little hook. It's got a little Nike Air Jordan square to it. That ain't the keys that he had on his hand when you were in his hand when you were talking with him. Am I correct?
No, sir, it was a car key and like 2 single house keys.
Judge, if I could have permission to publish about no more than about 5 minutes of this video, which is State's Exhibit 21.
Go ahead, you may.
For the record, Judge, I will start it up at 22:58:54 is where I'm starting it. So y'all are talking about his cars, and how many cars does he say he had?
He stated he had 2 cars. He stated he had 1 car he owned in the shop, and the Impala, the dealer guy, loaned it to him with an expired tag.
So y'all talking about, well, however many minutes that was. I stopped it at 3:02:35 for that for the record. Did he ever mention that he was driving a red Ford Fusion that night?
No, sir, he stated that he he stated he rode with his friend Tish, and he also walked.
Now, at about 4 o'clock or so in the morning, did you have occasion to go from the Reese Farms Trail over to 3900 Old Villa Way?
Yes, sir.
And what was over at Old Villa Way, this other one that's marked on State's Exhibit 1? What was over there?
The red Fusion was over there. Also, when the officer went over there and located the vehicle, they located a guy named Mr. Cortez inside the vehicle, along with the items that was stolen from Mr. Joshua, and also some of Devon's items.
I mean, like 4 o'clock when you went over there.
Oh, at 4 o'clock when I went over there, an officer had already secured everything that was apparently stolen from the robbery, including the car keys that apparently got stolen too. So we never gave him the car keys. It was all in the evidence in the patrol car. So I transported Mr. Joshua to the Ford Fusion. I transported for him to drive himself to our headquarters, which we never gave him any car keys at all. He got into the car and crunk up, and we began to go to the headquarters.
I put a photo up there in front of you, State's Exhibit 4. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes, sir, it's the red Fusion.
Is that an accurate photo of the red Ford Fusion that was in that driveway on that particular morning?
Yes, sir.
We tender State's Exhibit 4 then.
No objection?
Be admitted.
So you took, again, about 4 o'clock, you actually drove Mr. Gerard over to the Ford Fusion.
Yes, sir.
I mean, was Mr. Gerard at any time during this whole time, from the time that you came out there and the detectives, and then you driving him over there, was he ever handcuffed?
No, sir.
Was he ever told, hey, don't leave, you're being detained?
No, sir.
When you drove him over, did he get into the red, he meaning Mr. Gerard, did he get into the red Ford Fusion?
Yes, sir, he did.
And did he drive the red Ford Fusion?
Yes, sir.
But you didn't. Had you given him the keys to the red Ford Fusion?
No, sir. No officer gave him any keys to the vehicle.
Okay, Judge, I don't think I have any other questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue with cross-examination after lunch.
I was missing a page.